I'm Dion Dwas, and I'm with a company called MJC Liquid Energy. Our company focuses on supply chain consulting, and new generation leadership. I've had the privilege and the honor of being able to work in and around supply chains globally for the last 30 years or so. I've been exposed to many things in the supply chain and have had the fortunate exposure of being able to work end-to-end supply chains. Fantastic space to work in, and really, I believe, one of the most influential spaces in the business arena. Come together today to chat with you a little bit about supply chain, the end-to-end supply chain. We're going to do it at a very high level today to introduce you to all the components along this supply chain and how it fits together. So at a very, very high level, let's look at what the supply chain comprises of. So somewhere in the middle, and I don't mean the middle geographically, but the middle of input and output, you have a facility. That facility could be a factory, it could be a retail store, it could be a services, it could be anything you want to. For today's discussion, we're going to use a factory as an example. So you have your facility sitting here, and then you need inputs into this facility to make a product that your company wants to sell as an output. So you have a bunch of suppliers who supply you various things into this facility. Now your supplier base could be goods, it could be services, it could be raw materials, it could be anything that's needed to either maintain that facility or to transpose the production process into making a product to go out. These suppliers have the goods and services and materials that you need, and they need to move from the supplier to your facility. The movement from there to your facility is called the inbound supply chain. Right? They come to your facility, and we'll talk about all the logistics in your facility a little bit later. They get transformed into a finished good product that you sell on to your customer base. To move them to your customers, which may be local, global, they may be anywhere geographically, you need an outbound supply chain. So to move from your facility to your customer, we call the outbound supply chain. And when we talk about this end-to-end supply chain, your facility to supplier, we talk about the upstream supply chain. From your facility to your customer, we talk about the downstream supply chain. And when we talk about your facility, we talk about the on-site supply chain. Okay? Very high level in a nutshell. Supplier to facility, facility to customer. That's the end-to-end supply chain. However, as we all know, there are many, many facets and components that go into this high-level supply chain that I've just described. And let's unpack those components a little bit and put it into perspective and context of the supply chain function within a business. Alrighty then, so let's focus on the upstream supply chain. Okay, so from your supplier base into your facility. Now you know you can have many different types of suppliers. You can have suppliers who give you raw materials that you use in your factory to make a product. You'll have suppliers that bring you maintenance materials that helps your factory keep going. You'll have suppliers that will bring in services, an auditing company. You may have many, many different types of suppliers. To engage your supplier, you would typically put agreements or contracts in place. Before you can secure supply, you need to understand the pricing, the terms and conditions, the lead times, all the facets that allow that supplier to provide you with product. Then you would have a procurement function inside your supply chain, which once the contract is then put in place, procurement would then procure or purchase, as some companies like to call it. I prefer the term procurement. It's broad and it's more encapsulating. So you will have your procurement department then procure the goods and services as you need, when you need them into the factory. Then the inbound supply chain, which may come in the form of road transport, rail transport, air transport, ocean transport, whatever form it may come in, the goods need to be moved from your supplier into your factory. Now, as a business, you have the choice of either collecting or having them delivered, and that would depend on your supplier and how you've negotiated the contract with your supplier. Then you need to manage that supplier. You need to manage the pricing as it changes. You need to manage the performance with the supplier. So on the upstream side, direct involvement from supply chain is you will have contracting, procurement, and supplier management. Let's talk a little bit on the downstream side now. Now your factory is transformed everything that it's needed from the suppliers, and it's produced a good. That finished good now needs to move on to your customer base. So you have logistics. We call it outbound logistics, or distribution, as some companies would like to call it, from your facility to your customer. That requires managing transport, again, road, rail, marine, air, whichever way you transporting those goods is your outbound logistics. So you have a function in supply chain called outbound logistics. So in this box that we have as a facility, remember, you're receiving goods and services, you are distributing goods. So on your site, you need to have warehousing and warehousing. So receiving of goods and services and raw materials into some form of storage, warehousing, silos, or direct into the plant via a pipeline. The goods get moved, they get managed, materials management inside those storage facilities. When they are needed in the factory to be processed, they get moved from the storage facility into the factory. They get processed. They get moved from the factory into another storage facility. And I'm talking a classic supply chain. They do vary, and we'll get into that in a more advanced stage. They then get stored in a warehouse until the customer needs them. That warehouse again needs to be managed. So you have your outbound warehousing or storage and your inbound warehousing and storage. And we have what we call on-site logistics. You may have logistics that moves the product from your inbound storage to your factory. It may be a forklift, it may be people, it may be a truck, maybe a conveyor belt, maybe a pipeline. It moves. When it's finished, it needs to go from the factory into the warehouse. You need logistics on site, forklifts, trucks, whatever they may be, into that factory. Into that storage facility. Once the storage facility has those products, they will be then distributed to your customer. However, to keep that going, we need supply chain planning. So you need to plan when your products are coming in, and when your products are being manufactured, and when your products are going out. So we have end-to-end planning. Some people may call it supply and demand planning. Then we have supply chain enablement that sits under it. How do you enable the supply chain? So what systems are you using? How are you reporting? How are you making things visible? They also govern your compliance. How is governance and compliance working through this supply chain? Then you have overarching the supply chain, what we call supply chain strategy. Remember, in supply chain, what you're doing is balancing the seesaw. You want to have a strategy from your supply side all the way through to your customer side including your manufacturing facility, that enables the business. We need to balance the cash flow inside the business as well. So what agreements do we have with our customers? Do they pay us 60 days? Do they pay us 30 days, 90 days, whatever it might be? What type of agreements do we have with our suppliers? Remember, from a business perspective, you don't want too much outflow without enough inflow. And then, of course, you've got to pay for the activity that sits inside your factory. Also, you have working capital. So you have money tied up in inventory, so stock that's sitting in the inbound side. And you have working capital tied up in finished goods. So you also don't want to hold on to those goods, services and products for too long, because you've got money tied up there. It's money that you could generate from a sale, and it's money that you have to pay your suppliers. So this supply chain strategy is so critical. So everything really evolves from your supply chain strategy. Now, the supply chain strategy is obviously a lot more complex than I've explained to you, but I hope that it gives you a very good understanding of the importance of the supply chain strategy. I hope you've enjoyed this very high level, uncluttered, uncomplicated view of the end-to-end supply chain. Leave us a couple of comments if you want to. We'll certainly answer them for you. Subscribe to the channel. Watch the new stuff coming up. We're going to take each component of the supply chain and move you to a more advanced level. I hope you journey with us. As I say, subscribe, leave a couple of comments. We'll come back to you. It's been great chatting. Have a groovy day. And from MJC Liquid Energy, see you soon.